Welcome back to the board. Today, two human players meet over the board, maro1917 moving first, as sent, against harry0920. Let's follow it quietly, move by move. Sent begins by pushing the pawn to 26. Goat responds by pushing the pawn to 34. Sent plays the pawn to 25. Goat brings the bishop to 33. Sent pushes the pawn to 76. Goat pushes the pawn to 44. Sent brings the silver to 48. Goat swings the rook to 22. Sent pushes the pawn to 16, an inaccuracy that clearly favors Sent, as the engine preferred the gold to 58. Goat moves the king to 62, having built a solid castle around it. Sent pushes the pawn to 96. Goat responds by pushing the pawn to 94. Sent moves the king to 68, an inaccuracy as the engine preferred the gold to 68 instead, though Sent has built a Yagura-style castle around the king, and the game now clearly favors Sent. Goat pushes the pawn to 24. Sent captures the pawn on 24. Goat's bishop captures the pawn on 24. Sent drops a pawn on 25, a mistake that clearly favors Sent, and the engine preferred the king to 78 instead. Goat plays the bishop to 33. Sent plays the gold to 58. And Goat responds by moving their gold to 32. Sent moves their king to 78, an inaccuracy, as the engine preferred the silver to 78 instead. Goat pushes their pawn to 45. Sent pushes their pawn to 36, a mistake since the engine preferred the gold to 68, and the game now clearly favors Sent. Goat's bishop captures the bishop on 88, promoting to a horse, with check. Sent silver captures the horse on 88. Goat drops their knight to 33. Sent plays the knight to 37, a mistake that clearly favors Goat, with the engine preferring the pawn to 24 instead. Goat drops a bishop on 64. Sent drops a bishop on 65, which was a mistake, as the engine preferred the rook to 29 instead, and the game now clearly favors Sent. Goat moves their king to 72. Sent plays their silver to 77, an inaccuracy that clearly favors Sent, as the engine preferred a pawn to 56 instead. Goat plays their silver to 62. Sent silver advances to 66. Goat pushes their pawn to 35. Sent swings their rook to 26. Goat captures the pawn on 36. Sent recaptures the pawn on 36 with their rook. Goat's knight captures the pawn on 25. Sent's knight now captures Goat's knight on 25, a blunder that the engine preferred to replace with dropping a pawn on 23, and the game now clearly favors Sent. Goat's rook now captures the knight on 25. Sent drops a pawn on 26, but the balance swings toward Goat. Goat responds by dropping a pawn on 35. Sent captures the rook on 25 with the pawn. Goat captures the rook on 36 with the pawn. Sent drops a knight to 75. Goat drops a knight to 74. Sent drops a rook to 34, but the balance swings toward Goat. Goat's knight captures the silver on 66 with check, an inaccuracy since the engine preferred the bishop capturing the lance on 19, promoting to a horse. Sent plays the pawn captures the knight on 66. Goat drops a silver on 74, but the engine preferred the bishop capturing the knight on 75 instead, as this move is a mistake, and the game now clearly favors Goat. Sent plays the knight capturing the pawn on 83, promoting to a promoted knight, with check. Goat takes the promoted knight on 83 with the silver, but the engine notes that taking with the king would have been better, as the game now clearly favors Goat. Sent plays the bishop captures the silver on 83, promoting to a horse, with check. Goat's king captures the horse on 83. Cent drops a knight on 75, checking goat's king. Goat takes the knight with their bishop on 75. Cent takes back the bishop with their pawn on 75. Goat pushes their pawn to 46, and the balance swings towards Cent. Cent drops a bishop on 65, checking the king, though the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 56. Goat drops a knight on 74. Cent plays the pawn captures the knight on 74, an inaccuracy that the engine preferred to avoid by pushing the pawn to 56 instead. Goat drops a bishop on 45, checking the king. Cent plays the bishop to 56. And Goat takes the rook with their bishop on 34. Cent captures the pawn on 73 with their pawn, promoting to a token, with check, though the engine preferred capturing the bishop on 34 instead. The game now clearly favors Cent. Goat's king captures the token on 73. Cent drops a silver to 74 with check, and Cent is clearly on top now. Goat's king moves to 72. Cent's bishop captures the bishop on 34, a blunder that clearly favors Cent. The engine preferred the silver to 83, promoting to a promoted silver. Goat drops a rook on 75, with check. Cent drops a pawn on 77. Goat's rook now captures the silver on 74. Cent plays the bishop to 56, though Goat is clearly on top now. Goat swings the rook to 84. Cent drops a knight on 76, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat's rook swings over to 85. Cent drops a bishop on 74, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat plays the rook to 82. Cent pushes the pawn to 24, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a pawn on 22, a blunder since the engine preferred dropping a pawn on 73, and the game now clearly favors Goat. Cent plays the bishop to 65, which is quite interesting since Goat is still clearly on top. Goat drops a pawn on 83, a blunder that the engine preferred dropping a knight on 75 instead, and the game now clearly favors Cent. Cent's pawn captures the pawn on 46. Goat drops a pawn on 75, a blunder that clearly favors Goat, as the engine preferred dropping a silver on 54. Cent captures the pawn on 83 with the bishop, promoting to a horse, with check, though Goat is clearly on top now. Goat plays the rook captures the horse on 83. Cent's bishop captures the rook on 83, promoting to a horse with check, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat's king captures the horse on 83, and Goat is clearly on top now. Cent drops a rook on 85, checking the king. Goat moves the king to 72, which is a blunder, as the engine preferred the king to 92 instead. Cent drops the knight to 84, giving check, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat plays the king to 71, a blunder, as the engine preferred the king to 82 instead. Cent swings the rook across, a ranging rook approach, and captures the pawn on 75 with check. Goat plays the silver to 73, and is clearly on top now. Cent plays the rook to 35, though Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a rook on 29, a blunder that makes the game clearly favor Goat, though the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 43. Cent pushes the pawn to 95, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a knight on 54, a blunder that clearly favors them, though the engine preferred the rook capturing the pawn on 24, promoting to a dragon instead. Cent plays the gold to 68, though Goat is clearly on top now. Goat drops a bishop on 26, a blunder that clearly favors Goat, though the engine preferred the knight capturing the pawn on 66. Cent's rook captures the gold on 32, promoting to a dragon, but Goat is clearly on top now. Goat silver captures the dragon on 32, and goat is clearly on top now. Cent's pawn captures the pawn on 94. Goat silver captures the knight on 84, a blunder, as the engine preferred the bishop capturing the silver on 48, promoting to a horse. Cent pushes the pawn to 93, promoting to a token, but goat is clearly on top now. Goat's knight captures the token on 93, a blunder, as the engine preferred capturing the pawn on 66 instead, but the game still clearly favors goat. Cent drops a gold to 83, but goat is clearly on top. Goat captures the pawn on 66 with the knight, checking Cent, and now has a forced checkmate. Cent's king moves to 67, but goat still has a forced checkmate here. Goat plays the silver to 75, a blunder when the engine preferred dropping a bishop on 34. Cent pushes the pawn to 76, but goat now has a forced checkmate. Goat drops a bishop on 85, a blunder when the engine preferred dropping a knight on 55, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent moves the king to 56, though goat still has a forced checkmate here. Goat plays the bishop to 74, with check, a blunder as the engine preferred dropping a knight on 44, though the game still clearly favors goat. Cent drops a pawn on 65, but goat is clearly on top now, with a forced checkmate. Goat drops a knight on 64, checking the king, a blunder as the engine preferred capturing the silver on 48 with the bishop to promote to a horse, though goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent moves the king to 67, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat captures the pawn on 76 with the silver, checking the king, goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent's king captures the knight on 66, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat plays the bishop captures the gold on 83, a blunder that the engine preferred to drops a silver on 55, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent drops a knight on 75, but goat is clearly on top and still has a forced checkmate. Goat plays the silver capturing the pawn on 65 with check, a blunder as the engine preferred the bishop to 44 instead, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent's king moves to 77, but goat still has a forced checkmate here. Goat drops a rook on 76 with check, and goat now has a forced checkmate. Cent plays the king to 88, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat plays the bishop to 44 with check, a blunder that surprisingly leaves goat with a forced checkmate even though the engine preferred dropping a silver on 79. Cent drops a pawn on 77, but goat is clearly on top now, holding a forced checkmate. Goat's rook captures the knight on 75, and goat now has a forced checkmate. Cent pushes the pawn to 45, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat plays the bishop to 33, a blunder that the engine preferred to be the knight to 76, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Cent plays the gold to 78, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat drops the knight to 76, checking, and still has a forced checkmate. Cent's king moves to 98, but goat still has a forced checkmate. Goat drops in the knight to 85, with check, now having a forced checkmate. Cent drops a pawn on 97, but goat still has that forced checkmate, which is a bit of a problem for Cent. Goat captures the pawn on 97 with the knight, promoting to a promoted knight with check, and goat now has a forced checkmate. Cent plays the knight captures the promoted knight on 97, but goat still has a forced checkmate here. Goat drops a silver on 89, with check, and goat still has a forced checkmate here. And there it is, harry0920 takes the game. Thank you for sitting with me at the board, I'll see you at the next one.